Alrighty, well, now we come to the movies that I saw the trailers for, or I saw the posters for, and I was not enthused. But when I actually saw the movie, I was actually kind of surprised at how decent it was. Now, just to be clear, I don't think any of these are quote unquote great movies. Um, I don't think they're worthy of really any awards. Um, and if they are, it might be for something like visual effects or set design or whatever. Um, but with that said, let's get started. The first movie that I ended up liking was The Last Stand. Now, this I saw the trailer for this, and I see Arnold Schwarzenegger shooting people up, and I just thought to myself, this looks like him desperately trying to recapture some of the cheesy enjoyment that people got out of him in the '80s. Um, but as it turns out, it does that relatively well. I mean, I had a lot of fun watching The Last Stand. Um, because they do kind of poke fun at Schwarzenegger's age, how he's not exactly in his prime, and they do have, and a lot of it does seem pretty self-indulgent. A lot of it really does seem tongue-in-cheek, and for something like this, where a small town sheriff tries to stop this Pablo Escobar guy from crossing the border. You really, and the sheriff is this big Austrian guy who has Luis Guzman as a sidekick. You really can't take that too seriously, and they don't, thankfully. The action is shot very well. It is it's not it doesn't seem watered down. It doesn't seem like a rated R movie that was watered down to a PG-13. Um, and the acting is surprisingly solid. I mean, Jamie Alexander's in it. Um, Harry Dean Stanton shows up at one point. Forrest Whitaker is all right in it. Schwarzenegger is all right in it. Um, I mean, thankfully, he does not outright spoof himself. But you can tell that A, he's having fun, and B, he's playing it straight. I mean, like I said, this is not a parody. It is a send-up. There's a difference. And yeah, I just thought it was a fun little action movie. The second movie that was better than I thought it would be was Beautiful Creatures. And the trailers for this just screamed Twilight knockoff or Twilight cash-in, trying to get the Twilight crowd to go see it. This is better than any of the Twilight movies. I know that's not saying much, but Beautiful Creatures is supposedly based on a best-selling series of books, and it's about witches in the deep South. I forget if they actually say where in the South this takes place, but the thing with the romance in this is that the actors are actually allowed to act. The actors are better than the actors in Twilight, at least the main two. Well, the thing with Pattinson in Twilight is that I might get to this in another video, but the thing with Pattinson is that you get the feeling he can act, and I have seen him act before, but for some reason, I guess out of respect or not wanting to make Kristen Stewart feel bad, he holds it back or something. I don't know, but the romance here feels real. It feels like a high school romance. Like, they haven't really thought everything through, and it's not irritating like it is in Twilight. But instead, it's actually kind of charming. I mean, you really grow to like these characters. You want to see them. You want to see them get their happy ending, and there are actual stakes here. There are actual. I mean, there is an actual interesting backstory to these witches. There are interesting side characters, like Jeremy Irons is in it. Emmy Rossum is having a lot of fun in this. Emmy Rossum's pretty. She's pretty cartoonish. She's a lot of fun to watch. And yeah, like I said, it does. It's not great, but I would have liked to have. I would have been okay with the sequel if done right. I mean, I'm not saying if you absolutely hated the Twilight movies you will love this, but if you want to see this type of story done a lot better than Twilight's, then Beautiful Creatures is not bad. I didn't find anything horrible in it. It's got problems. Don't get me wrong. It's got problems. The main villain witch, who you never see much of, is not a very interesting character. The movie is kind of unfocused. I mean, and the passage of time is not conveyed all that well. But again, it's just a satisfactory little romance story. But the sad thing is, I think, given the supposed best-selling nature and supposed critical acclaim that these books have gotten, I can't help feeling that fans and general audiences deserved something a little more distinct and a little more groundbreaking, because there are parts of this movie that feel kind of like Twilight, except done better, and I think that's a real detriment. But hopefully people can recognize it as something unique, something different than Twilight, because I think the biggest crime about this movie is that it's living in the shadow of Twilight, and that's not right. Twilight sucks. Next movie that I was pleasantly surprised by was Snitch, the crime thriller starring Dwayne Johnson, and this movie's got its fair share of problems too. This movie is kind of uneven. It's kind of disjointed. It's kind of repetitive. A lot of the scenes do kind of feel the same, but Dwayne Johnson gives a genuinely good performance here. You really buy that he is this very broken up father who desperately wants to get his son out of jail, and while at the same time fearing for his life because he's getting involved with these unsavory characters, and it's just, I was really impressed by how much I liked Dwayne Johnson in this. Really, when it comes to wrestlers turned actors, he's one of the major highlights. I mean, who else can we name? Andre the Giant. Really, the only thing I've liked him in is Princess Bride, because the role was written for him. So I don't really think I can count that. Hulk Hogan, I don't really like a lot of his movies. John Cena, Steve Austin. I could be mixing these guys up. I am not an aficionado on wrestling. But I don't know. I just think it was a good, soulful performance by Dwayne Johnson. Not anything special when measured up to other actors, but I think it plays off of his likability, and it plays off what he has learned as an actor since he first started out doing this, and yeah, he carries the movie relatively well. I was actually very, very surprised at the fact that he could carry this very serious movie by himself, and really hold his own for the most part. I mean, all things considered, he wasn't being upstaged by actors like Susan Sarandon. I mean, he was. I bought him in the role. And honestly, for wrestling stars, that's not too much to ask. So yeah, Jack the Giant Slayer. Okay, this is probably the one I am most conflicted about, because this, I admit, is not a good movie. It is. I mean, there are stuff in here. There's stuff in here that I could easily point to and say that really sucks. That's really stupid. But it's Bryan Singer doing a more action-oriented take on the traditional Jack and the Beanstalk story. There's this whole race of giants, CGI giants, who kidnap this princess, and Nicholas Hoult, I think that's how you say his name. Nicholas Hoult, Beast from X-Men First Class. He plays Jack. He goes up to Beanstalk to save her while teaming with Ewan McGregor, who is doing his best Errol Flynn. He's dressed and acts like Errol Flynn, or kind of a slightly more cartoonish version of Errol Flynn. He's this very heroic type character. Stanley Tucci plays this Grima Wormtongue type guy who sides with the Giants and wants to claim dominion over the Giants. And Ian McShane plays this king who desperately wants to get his daughter back, and all of these different factions, all these different forces converge, and it makes for much swashbuckling action, and yeah, the acting honestly seems kind of self-aware. I mean, they are not taking this. They're not winking at the camera. They're not phoning in their performance. They're still giving good performances, but it's kind of I'm trying to think of a way to describe it, because they are giving serious performances, but the context of their serious performances and the way the movie kind of plays out, and even some of their reactions, you can tell that this is a movie not meant to be taken all that seriously. You can tell that this is meant to be a high-flying adventure movie, and for the most part, it satisfies that purpose. I mean, the script is limited. It's thin, and the movie goes on, I think, for a bit too long. I think they're at the top of the beanstalk for a little too long, and some of the effects are honestly kind of questionable. Some of the costumes are look pretty ridiculous even for this movie's standards, and I don't know. I'm having somewhat of a hard time wholeheartedly recommending this, because it is largely a mixed package. You can barely tell that this is one of Bryan Singer's movies. I mean, it just doesn't really seem like one of his. I mean, Bryan Singer, for those that don't know, he helmed the first two X-Men movies, and he's going to helm Days of Future Past. So maybe when he gets back to his to his franchise, then maybe being in familiar territory will result in more sure-handed direction. And that's not to say that the direction is bad, but it doesn't really seem as confident as some of his other movies. But as a silly adventure movie goes, this could have been a lot worse. This could have been horrible. Instead, it's just average. Next movie that surprised me, and I actually will go so far as to say that I actually kind of like this movie, is Olympus Has Fallen. Olympus Has Fallen. It's Die Hard in the White House. I mean, these Korean terrorists take over the White House, taking the president hostage. The president is played by is played by Aaron Eckhart, and this ex-Secret Service agent is trapped in the White House with the terrorists, and he's basically taking out these Korean terrorists using various guerrilla tactics. And this Special Forces ex-Secret Service agent is played by Jared Butler, giving a really intense performance. Same with Aaron Eckhart, and to a lesser extent, the leader of the terrorists also, who is played by Rick Yoon. I think that's how you say his name. And yeah, I just found this to be a very entertainingly intense flick. This movie is a hard R-rated action flick, and it shows. There is blood everywhere. There are people getting blown away by machine guns. There are people dying all over the place. There's cussing everywhere. It honestly feels like this should have been a Die Hard flick. And what I found even more interesting is that this movie actually comes from a pair of first-time writers. This movie comes from a pair of writers who have never written a screenplay before, and they worked on a screenplay for this. And for their first attempt, they did a really, really good job. I mean, the plot itself it can be very distracting how it blatantly steals from Die Hard at times. What with them communicating over the walkie-talkie, and like I said, the whole scenario is reminiscent of Die Hard. But in my opinion, Jared Butler is not only more likable than Bruce Willis, but also he is a better actor than Bruce Willis, and I think he is more believable in this kind of intense role than Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis I do not like. I think he's extremely overrated. I think he thinks way too highly of himself, and I don't think he's as capable of an action lead as he's sometimes made out to be. Jared Butler should do these kinds of movies more often. I mean, instead of the really crappy movies that he's been doing recently, like what was that thing, Playing for Keeps, or whatever, all these romantic comedies that he's been doing. He should do these really intense action movies more often. And the director is Antoine Fuqua. I hope I'm getting his name right, because I really like this guy. He did Training Day with Denzel Washington and Ethan Hawke. He did what I actually found to be a very underrated version of King Arthur with Clive Owen. I mean, that version of King Arthur is not perfect, but I liked it. I mean, I like the grittier take and more historically significant take on King Arthur. I thought it was a tight flick. And I keep going back to the director. I get the feeling that he is a very good director who just keeps getting lackluster scripts, because his movies, aside from Training Day, have not gotten the best reviews. But one thing that the majority of critics praised for Olympus Has Fallen was his direction. I mean, he really knows how to shoot an intense thriller like this, and he really knows how to shoot an action movie. The action in this movie, as much as there was, it's a good thing that it was well shot, and that it was as gritty and no holds barred as it was. It doesn't get cartoonishly bloody, but it gets about as bloody as you would expect these guys to get in this type of situation. So I like this movie. I've actually met a lot of people who say that they prefer it over Die Hard. To each their own. In my opinion, none of the Die Hard movies are very good except the first one. But that's just my opinion. Olympus Has Fallen actually, with there are two major problems with it. I think it's a little too long, which leads to some of the more over the top stunts and some of the more over the top explosions feeling like I said, over the top and bloated and drawn out. And the second problem with this movie, and I feel kind of bad about saying this, it's a little too jingoistic. Now, this type of movie, this type of hostage situation where the White House is taken over, I don't mind. It should be very pro-American, but geez, the American flag is shown, and the American spirit is shown so often in this movie that the American flag should have been credited in the credits. It is that in your face. But with that said, after getting out of this movie, I had a fun time with it. And yeah, if you're a fan of action movies, then I recommend you check it out. Next movie that I was surprised by was Evil Dead, the remake of Evil Dead. Now, the first three Evil Dead movies are great cartoonish fun. They are practically a benchmark of horror comedy. And when I heard that they were remaking the first Evil Dead, I was just thinking to myself, why? Can't you just go back and watch any of the three original Evil Dead movies, really? Then I heard Sam Raimi was producing it, and Bruce Campbell was behind it. He's not in it, or at least not in the main movie. He shows up after the credits, but I digress. Hearing that those two, the guys behind the original movies, were involved like that, I was like, oh, okay, I'll give this one a shot. What I got was a movie that, while it's not as good as any of the original three Evil Dead movies, it as a mindless horror movie gore fest, it works very well. It kind of starts to fizzle out toward the end, and some of the references, in fact, a lot of the references are kind of groan-worthy, but the effects are fantastic. The blood and swamp effects and all of these really gruesome images. There is hardly any CGI in this movie. I cannot recall a single CGI shot in this movie, and that is something in this day and age that I just have to give props to, because too often horror movies or action movies resort to CGI blood or CGI gore effects, and this one does it practically and shoots it very well, so you can actually see the effects. I mean, the camera is held very still most of the time. It doesn't resort to the shaky cam, and while you aren't necessarily gripped by these characters, you do want to see what happens to them. You want to see what's going to happen to them next in terms of how they're going to get killed off or what kind of injuries they're going to sustain. And these effects are so good that some of the imagery, or some of the maimings, some of that type of action really actually got me to cringe. It was that gruesome and that well realized. And this might just be a really shallow side of me talking about how the effects make the movie, but the movie also really manages to know how to balance the effects with a gleeful sense of horror-driven fun. It seems kind of self-aware at times. In an Evil Dead movie, that is key. An Evil Dead movie, no matter how much in despair the characters can be in, the tone of the movie the tone of the movie is seemingly always has just a tiny little bit of tongue-in-cheek about it. And this movie, capturing that, I thought was one of the most important parts of why I thought this movie worked. Like I said, it's not as good as any of the other ones, but and I still think the concept of an Evil Dead remake is pretty pointless, but as it stands, I had a fun time with it. If you're a horror fan and you want to see some refreshingly realistic effects, and you just want to be taken on a fun ride, then I recommend it. Another movie I was surprised by was Oblivion, and this is kind of on the same plane as Olympus Has Fallen in that I actually kind of like this movie. It's too long. I can think of several parts of it that can be chopped out, but visually this movie is stunning to behold. This is one of the best looking realizations of post-apocalyptic Earth I have ever seen. And it's directed by this guy named Joseph Krasinski. I think that's his last name. And previously he had done Tron Legacy. I was not a fan of Tron Legacy. It looked cool. I liked the way it looked, but that was about it. So when I heard he was doing this little passion project, it's based on an unpublished graphic novel that he had previously done. I was not very enthusiastic, especially given how terrible After Earth looked, and how it's kind of that same type of concept of a few people running around post-apocalyptic Earth. But upon seeing it, the performances I actually thought were surprisingly compelling, especially by Tom Cruise. I mean, Tom Cruise really pulls you into this world. He pulls you into the everyman character that he is trying to play. And Olga Kurylenko is, even though she's not given much to do, she's a very sympathetic character. Morgan Freeman lends a lot of gravitas when he's there. He was also in Olympus Has Fallen, doing kind of the same thing of lending a lot of gravity to the movie. Jaime Lannister from Game of Thrones is here, albeit briefly. He's all right. Really, the only performance that I don't like is Melissa Leo. I mean, Melissa Leo plays this southern version of Hal from 2001: A Space Odyssey. She plays this big artificial intelligence that it turns out is responsible for the destruction of Earth. And I just found her to be irritating. Every time she showed up, or every time you heard her voice, it just completely took me out of the movie. But with that said, the action is very well shot. The landscapes are breathtaking. The scope of the movie is epic. And like I said, the acting is very solid. And you really, as bland as this future world looked in the trailers, you really get into it. You really get into how stylized it is. And part of that has to come from the music. The music is very good. It's kind of like Daft Punk meets Hans Zimmer type of orchestra. So, or it's not even an orchestra. It's more like this really 80s kind of techno beat. But I was actually surprised at how much I was getting into this movie. But the thin script kind of distracted me. And like I said, the movie is a little too long. I could have easily trimmed about half an hour out of it, maybe 20 minutes. But I guess that's one of the risks that you take when you see a director do a passion project like this, because they want as much of their vision to come on screen as possible. And I'm guessing it was no mistake that on the DVD there were barely any deleted scenes. But Oblivion, I recommend that movie. I like it, but if you don't like it, whether it be because of the thin script or because you just do not want to see another post-apocalyptic movie, I understand. But at least take a glance at it, because visually this movie is so well realized and so well shot that you will not be disappointed from a visual perspective. Next movie that pleasantly surprised me was Byzantium, and this is kind of on the same plane as Beautiful Creatures in that it's taking what on the surface looks like this Twilight knockoff and really doing something new with it. This movie, it's a little disjointed. The script could be a little stronger. I mean, the characters are not that interesting. The acting is a little more understated than I would have liked, but the premise is what carries this movie. I think the premise of these vampires who have survived until modern day. It's done far better than Twilight. There's a very admirable bleak atmosphere going around in this movie. Visually, this movie has a style that is consistent with director Neil Jordan's previous standards, and I really like some of the. Again, I keep coming back to this. Unlike Twilight, this movie changes some of what we've come to associate with vampirism in the past, because basically the vampires in this movie, they do not have fangs. Instead, they have these single long nails on their hands, and what they do is they pierce the neck or the wrist of whoever they're going to drink blood from, and that basically, like I said, that basically makes a makeshift sippy hole to drink blood out of. So that's very creative. It's also very creative that in order to become a vampire, Gemma Arterton and Saoirse Ronan go to this island in the middle of this body of water, and once they undergo this ambiguous ritual, they go outside and they are drenched in this blood colored liquid. Visually, this movie is very interesting, and I don't really think it ever reaches a point where you are calling this movie out on, like, that is not a vampire, that's a stupid idea. I really think this could have been this really compelling, really great movie if it just had a stronger script. The premise is good, the acting is decent, but the story and the script just could have been a little stronger. But as it is, I'm glad I saw it, and if you want to see vampires in somewhat of a reinterpretation that is not offensive to the fundamental concept of vampires, then I recommend you see it. I don't think you'll be that disappointed. This is the End. I don't really have much to say on This Is the End. I just thought the trailers looked absolutely wretched. I just thought there was no brain behind this. I thought this was going to be another really stupid comedy that we have seen a million times, and it was. But I will say that I laughed more than I thought I would in this movie. There are so many jabs at the actors in this movie that I was hard pressed not to laugh at least some of them. I was not rolling on the floor laughing like a lot of other audiences were, because I just thought the script really lacked focus. It really just came out of nowhere a lot of the time. It really seemed to be this kind of poor interpretation of an Edgar Wright movie, like Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz and The World's End. The story really lacks focus, and that may have been the point, but but in terms of getting invested in these characters, it doesn't. I don't really think it works to the desired effect. But like I said, the jabs at the actors involved can be interesting. I like the fact that they are kind of going against the mold, and that the actors in this movie are essentially playing themselves and kind of spoofing themselves. Like Franco owns this big house, and he has all these things that he considers art. He talks down to Jay Baruchel. He's like, have you ever played a video game? Then you like art. So he can be a lot of fun in the movie. Certainly better than he was in Oz. Seth Rogen can be fairly likable. Jay Baruchel, I actually thought was a little too petulant to really root for. Jonah Hill, I thought, did a complete 180 in terms of motivation and in terms of personality. They were trying to go for a twist, but I just think it was radically out of character. But yeah, like I said, I laughed more than I thought I would. I don't want to wholeheartedly recommend this movie because you can, like I said, the script really lacks focus. It has a plethora of problems, in my opinion. And the story is not very strong. It's another post-apocalyptic movie. You've seen this before. You've seen this type of humor, this type of apocalyptic gallows humor done better before. And tonally, this goes through a few tonal shifts, and some of the time it can actually be more unpleasant than it is funny. But again, it's an average, satisfactory, okay comedy. I can easily see a lot of people laughing at this a lot more than I did. I mean, some of it I can just chalk up to it not being my type of humor. I don't really think the humor in this was done poorly, so much as it just not being my type of humor. It's not the type of humor that I laugh out loud at. That's all I really have to say. Oh boy, World War Z. I can completely understand why someone, especially a fan of the book, would not like this movie. This movie completely tosses the source material out the window. I admit that. This movie abandons interesting concepts for being, at least on the surface, a generic zombie movie that just happens to star Brad Pitt. It's by the director of Quantum of Solace, which was a terrible movie. But with all that being said, and even the trailers, I was watching the trailers thinking, this movie looks so bad. Because it's doing the Inception soundtrack. You have all these cartoon CGI zombies running around. It does not look... The effects look unfinished. But when I saw the movie, it really... Toward the beginning, it's actually pretty bad. Because it doesn't really feel all that cinematic. It just feels like a never-ending chase. You're not really stopping to get to know these characters, but as the movie goes on, it gets better. As the movie keeps going, and you gradually learn more about these characters and how far they are willing to go to survive, and what they ultimately have to do to provide for each other. I honestly think that this turns into a good zombie flick near the end, when they're kind of sneaking around the hospital, trying to get the supplies. The best part of this movie is the last 20 minutes, and by the end of it, by the end of the movie, I don't think you will feel angry. I mean, even someone who can admit that they do not like this movie, I don't think will be angry with it, because the chase scenes are shot well. They're shot better than Quantum of Solace. There's no, at least not that I can remember, there is no shaky cam. There is the performance by Brad Pitt, and to a lesser extent a lot of the supporting actors, is pretty good, even though they do not get as much to do as they need. They do sell you on the premise. Brad Pitt in particular does a pretty good job. He's honestly the best actor in the movie. Him and the military chick that shows up at the end, she's very good. And I just think, as far as average zombie flicks go, I think this is okay. And I think I would like to see a sequel to this, and it's being done by the guy that did The Impossible, the Tsunami movie. And I think with a more sure-handed direction, with a less troubled production, and a more solid, more consistently good script, you can really make something great out of the sequel. I think Brad Pitt has openly stated, yeah, I'd be open to doing a sequel. Because what I've heard, this movie had a very troubled production, but it was enough of a box office success that they now want to revive the idea of a sequel, and honestly, I'm not opposed to that. If you just take away some of the action, if you make the movie more compelling and more gripping towards the beginning, then I honestly think more people would have been won over by it. But as it is a movie that starts out very mediocre, very underwhelming, and as it goes on, gets better and better and better, until at the end, where I'm still convinced in the last 20 minutes it turns into a really, really good movie. It turns into a very suspenseful movie. Because, and even the effects are better than I expected. The effects, even though the zombies, you can clearly still tell that they are CG when there's like a million of them on screen at once. They don't look nearly as bad or lacking texture as they did in the trailers, and there are actually a few practical effects. I mean, there are a few practical prosthetic and makeup zombies here and there. So yeah, I just think the movie gets more humanity. It gets more audience investment, and the drama hits a lot harder. And it gets more tension as it goes along. And if you can sit through it, and if you can get through the entire thing, I don't think you will walk away angry. And like I said, I would like to see a sequel. Pacific Rim. Okay. This is another movie that I will admit is a good movie. I think is a good movie. When I saw the trailer for this, it's kind of the same thing with World War Z. I was thinking, we have seen this type of action before, where giant opponents fight giant opponents in a city. But it's Guillermo del Toro, and he is paying homage to Japanese monster movies. I can get behind that, because I am a fan of Godzilla movies. And watching this movie, it does not take itself too seriously. And while the humans are essentially archetypes, a lot of them are fairly likable. especially Charlie Hunnam and Rinko Kikuchi as Mako. Idris Elba is very good, even though his character name is ridiculous. Ron Perlman is lends some charm to the movie when he is there, and the robot fights, the fights between the robots and the giant monsters are shot well. You really get a sense of the size of these creatures. You really get a sense of how powerful they are. And yeah, it's just a fun ride. It's just a really, really fun ride. That's, I will admit, I've met people who do not like this movie because they say it's an effects show. I've actually heard one person say if Charlie Hunnam spent more than a week on this movie, it was too long because the entire movie is CGI. I don't believe that to be the case because basically the whole first half of the movie, or the majority of the first half of the movie, is them training in the military base. So the entire movie up to about the halfway point is the build up to the series of very, very well done monster battles in the second half, and you never get tired of it. Just when you are starting to really say, okay, it's another monster battle, the movie's over. The movie is over. It's just a good self-contained movie about giant monsters versus giant aliens. And what I can really admire about this movie is that it okay, so too many summer movies feel the need to be dark nowadays. Too many summer movies feel the need to be really really deep and really kind of depressing. Granted, a lot of that has to do with the success of Christopher Nolan's Batman movies, which I love. But I had so much more fun at Pacific Rim than I did in watching some of the dramas that came out, and watching some of the Nolan wannabes. I'm trying not to point to Man of Steel because Man of Steel I just thought to be a very joyless movie. Pacific Rim, it's kind of like Independence Day except done better. Pacific Rim is by no means a deadly serious movie. It is a tongue-in-cheek popcorn flick, and it knows that. Guillermo del Toro knows that. The actors know that, and while they are giving straight performances, they are not trying to act like this is some type of Shakespearean art. This is not high art. This is not high class cinema. It's monsters versus robots, and that is what you get. And what you get is done very well. White House Down. This is another movie I have conflicting feelings about because in terms of the plot and in terms of the characters, in terms of the whole movie, really, it is very similar to Olympus Has Fallen, and Olympus Has Fallen is a lot better than this, I think. Partially because this was a PG-13. I'm not one to say that the R-rated movies are always better than the PG-13 movies, but there are parts in this movie where you can clearly see that's blood or some type of more intense effect should have been there, but just wasn't because it's a PG-13. Like some people get blown away with Gatling guns and there's no blood. And I think Olympus Has Fallen really better captured the carnage of these enemy troops capturing the White House. It really captured the death. It really captured the destruction a lot more. But with that said, this is especially if you're a Channing Tatum fan, you will not actively hate this movie. This is a stupid movie. And if they were playing it as serious as Olympus Has Fallen could sometimes get, and not that Olympus Has Fallen was trying to be an overly serious movie, because a lot of that movie was very kind of I keep using this phrase, kind of tongue in cheek, but the thing with White House Down is that it's kind of Olympus Has Fallen, except not done as well, because the lead is not as strong. Channing Tatum is not as strong as Jared Butler. Jamie Foxx is not as strong as Aaron Eckhart as the president. Really, the only thing that this movie does better was casting James Woods as the bad guy, as the main bad guy. Because Rick Yoon in Olympus Has Fallen, as cold and menacing as he could sometimes be, James Woods just had a lot more charisma. You really got into his motivation more in this one. But he's really the highlight of the bad guys, because the bad guys were more effective and more intimidating in Olympus Has Fallen, because White House Down has Jason Clarke, who just looks really. Jason Clarke is not intimidating. He looks goofy. He sometimes acts goofy, and I just could not take him seriously. I did not like him as a villain. He seemed like a very mean-spirited villain. He seemed more like a high school bully than an actual force to be reckoned with. I didn't like him in Zero Dark 30 either. The only movie so far I've seen him in that I've actually kind of liked him in was Lawless, where he was meant to be kind of stupid. Yeah, James Woods and this one random guy that watches over the hostages, who actually really looks like Bennett from Commando. I mean, he's got the slick back hair, he's got the mustache, he has the crazy eyes, he has the sleeveless vest on. I mean, it was actually kind of uncanny how much this guy looked like Bennett from Commando. Oh my god. But yeah, there are good things about this movie. The Channing Tatum does his best. I mean, you can tell he's really trying. And a lot of the stunts look pretty legit. I heard that Tatum did a lot of his own stunt work, and it shows. I mean, you can tell that he is very, very devoted to getting as physically involved as possible when it comes to the fight scenes in the movie. And the fight scenes do not look fake. They do not look rehearsed. They do not look sterile. They, like I said, they look pretty legit. But Jamie Foxx is not very good in the movie. He's essentially playing Barack Obama, and it's really distracting how he's kind of using that kind of preachy Obama speech pattern, while at the same time trying to be this hardcore action star. It's kind of distracting. Joey King, who I previously praised as the voice of the China Girl in Oz the Great and Powerful, she is terrible in this. She is annoying. She is so annoying. She does not contribute anything to the story. She's basically kind of like Alyssa Milano in Commando, except Alyssa Milano was better. Commando is better. Yeah, Joey King just... I mean, she keeps calling... Channing Tatum plays her dad, but since he did not come to her flag twirling thing, she keeps calling him John. She randomly spouts White House trivia, and it's not endearing. It's just weird and annoying and really misguided if they wanted us to like her. But Maggie Gyllenhaal is decent. Maggie Gyllenhaal is decent. Even though she doesn't really have much to do, she's kind of stuck on the outside. But yeah, it's definitely not as good as Olympus Has Fallen, in my opinion. But if you see it, I don't think you will be entirely dissatisfied. I wasn't dissatisfied. I expected it to be complete garbage, and it wasn't. It had points in it. I didn't feel like I wasted my time renting it. Because I was not going to go see it in theaters. Whatever. And the final movie that pleasantly surprised me was Two Guns, the action movie starring Denzel Washington and Mark Wahlberg. And let me stress this. This movie is ungodly stupid. It is completely unfocused in terms of the plot. There are too many characters who do not get remotely enough screen time. The plot seems to think it's a lot smarter than it is, and some of the twists feel unnecessary. They feel kind of out of character. But with that said, this movie hinges on the fun that Denzel Washington and Mark Wahlberg are having. They have surprisingly good chemistry with each other. It is very fun to see them play off of each other while at the same time shooting basically everyone around them. And I just think it's a fun, escapist action flick. I mean, that's what I'm saying on a lot of these things, but it's just a fun shoot 'em up flick. It's kind of like shoot 'em up, just in terms of how a lot of the action proceeds and how the characters are kind of approaching it. And this movie has a very good cast. It has Washington, Wahlberg, Mark. I already said him. Paula Patton as Washington's girlfriend, James Marsden, James Olmos, and probably my favorite character in the movie is Bill Paxton's character, he plays this crazy guy who's trying to get the money that Washington and Wahlberg took from him, and he's kind of like Hudson, his character Hudson from Aliens, but crazier and more deadly because this guy will not hesitate to shoot anyone on screen. Paxton completely lit up the movie whenever he showed up. Whenever he showed up, I was like, yes, another scene with Paxton, because he's like the main two leads. He is just having so much fun, and it's hard not to have fun with him. He's got this Russian roulette thing going on where he empties out a few bullets from the gun, and he's like, "Have you ever played Russian roulette?" And he constantly discharges the gun that he's using because it's shaped like a roulette. The actual barrel is shaped like a roulette, and it rotates around like a roulette. It's dumb. The whole movie is dumb. The whole movie is, when you get right down to it, not that well written, but like I said, it's carried on how much fun the actors are having. And that can sometimes work, and it can sometimes not, because sometimes even when the actors are having fun, it's hard to get swept up in it because of how bad the rest of the movie is. This movie is a mediocre action flick that is, instead of being a bad action flick, this is a mediocre action flick that is elevated by the people in it, and the very over the top and off kilter performances that they are giving. They clearly enjoy being around one another. They clearly enjoyed working on this movie, and you know what? I enjoyed watching this movie. It is that gleefully brainless. Yeah, those are just a few movies that surprised me. Like I said, I don't think any of them are great movies. But if you watch any of them, I don't think you will entirely regret it. And hopefully, I've given some sort of idea of who would like each of the movies and who each of the movies is made for, etc., etc. And yeah, as far as I know, the next list is going to be the worst movies of the year. Not looking forward to that.